Hello and welcome. I am Ryan Page. I am an application specialist. We're going to be discussing company setup and customization. More specifically, we're going to be talking about user-defined attributes. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Okay, what is a custom user-defined attribute? Well, a user-defined attribute, those are fields that contain data or information populated by you, the user. They are not template attributes. Template attributes would be like a name or a profile or material. These attributes you can place any information on. Comment, preliminary mark, user fields 1 through 4, concrete breaks, submittal information, those types of informations that you find on the tabs of the user-defined attribute dialog box for your objects. That's what we're talking about here. And what defines them is contained in what we call an input file, or specifically an object.imp file. So that's where we kind of dictate the parameters of what an attribute is. Now, Tekla has numerous UDAs pertaining to all aspects of concrete and steel and rebar and all that sort of thing. And it references many files to bring in the UDAs specific to those types of objects. Now, custom UDAs are created by you and implemented by you to supplement any specific company workflows or data streams that you need to account for that may not be as generic as what Tekla provides. They are implemented the exact same way as many of our default UDAs are in the environment, and that's done by defining the attribute definitions and associating those definitions to specific objects inside of the object.imp file. So to paint that picture a little bit better, let's look at the contents of an object.imp file or an input file. Now, this is a plain text file that contains the definition of different user-defined attributes. Now, keep in mind, Tekla can reference many object.imp files from multiple locations, as stated before. So you can have these in firm folders and project folders that you only use part of the time, some of the time, or for specific instances. Inside of an object.imp file, you're going to find some key elements. First, the definition of the attribute, these parameters, and we'll break this down here on the next slide, of what goes into defining an actual attribute. Now, these attributes are listed under a header. This header contains all the attributes that will show up on a tab. So you can look at the header as the tab page, as it says there right in the image. And then lastly, we'll direct that tab page to be applicable to certain objects. So down here below, we are using our pour card tab page, and we are applying this to pour units specifically. However, other examples, you may see parameters or concrete parameters applied to concrete beams, concrete columns, concrete slabs, and so on and so forth. So you may have quite the list down here below on where one tab and those. So with that, we have a basic understanding of how current UDAs are created and implemented inside of Tekla, and it's really no different in implementing your own custom ones. You just have to actually create them. The cool thing, though, is that it doesn't really require any coding knowledge. Understanding of the syntax, which is what we just covered and why we just covered it, is pretty much all you're going to really need. And actually, it's more helpful than a requirement as it is. You don't necessarily have to copy an existing object.imp file and then edit it, and you don't necessarily have to start with a blank text file editor, because we have a tool in the warehouse called part user attribute setup that's going to help define that entire file for us with the user interface. So let's take a quick peek on how this tool actually operates and how you could use it to create your own custom UDAs. Okay. So once you've downloaded the user attribute setup tool and ran the installer, you're actually going to get an exe file. It is not an extension that goes natively into Tekla. It's its own executable. So save it to your desktop or other file path where you may find it easy to get to. When you double click on it, it's going to open up the dialog box that we saw in the previous slides, and here we have a nice little welcome message saying, hey, do you want to run through the guided tour, if you will? If you hit yes, it's going to start to highlight and step through each one of the process in order to create an attribute and assign it to a tab page, and then determine what it is here that you're going to go ahead and apply it to. Again, so this is your attribute definition. this is where that resides. Once you add that information, this is where the tabs that attribute will be applied to, the tab list. And then also down here, when you're checking these boxes, it'll associate with those types of objects. Once you get through that, you hit OK and then create. So we're actually gonna step through this really quickly. And then we're going to look at maybe a slightly more specific example. I'm actually going to let this thing play out for us since I've been chatting so much over it. And then we're going to go and use what they've put in here just to get an idea of what's going on. So it's kind of autopilot for me as it is. But now we just need to step 8, press the create button. And there it is. Now, one thing that's really cool before I do that is if you hit the instructions button here, it's going to bring up a dialog that's you can have that open. Take a snapshot of it because it won't let you actually interact until you close. So, but this will help you step through those processes if you forget what step 3 is and you're on, step 5, that sort of thing. But here, let's go ahead. We'll just use this default stuff. We'll hit add, and we'll hit add there, and then we're going to go ahead and hit create. And then we're just going to save it to a place. We'll do it to the desktop, and we'll just add a underscore, and we'll put Basecamp. There we are. Okie dokie. Oh, it's on my other monitor there. Here we are. So let's go ahead. I'll close this for the moment, and let's just take a look at what it quickly produces. So this looks slightly familiar from the example in the slideshow. We've got overall listing. This applies to parts, and we have our tab page here and our single attribute that we created. My text on my dialog, the tutorial attribute, and then what looks different from our previous example is the list of parts here that things apply to. So concrete beams, columns, contour plates, strip footings, and so on and so forth. So that those check boxes in that dialog box really kind of help do that. Notice that for each one of those, the tab page has been applied here. One thing to talk about this is this numerical value here at the end of that listing for the tab page. That's kind of its order with all the other tabs on the UDA dialog box. So parameters is usually, I think, 8 or 10. I can't remember off the top of my head. So to avoid conflicting with anything that's existing, usually we start at 100. At least the tool does, and it's a good practice. So now that we had a quick look, let's step through, get an idea of what it is to take to implement something that's meaningful. I'm going to use an example here. I have a Trimble Connect open, and inside Trimble Connect, if you haven't seen the things called property sets, these are properties you can create right in Trimble Connect and write to objects, but they don't exist in Tekla. And we go over a workflow on how to copy that back into the model. But sometimes those attributes don't exist inside of Tekla proper, and that's where custom UDAs is one use case where they come in handy. And so if we're looking at this kind of generic report card, I have fields here like plan review. Is it yes? Was the plans reviewed? Form locations. The idea here is that people will select objects or pores in the model, select this, provide the value, and write to the object. It's kind of a statusing type workflow. So approve, rejected, pending on form location, installation, cracks, that sort of thing. I thought it would be a good idea to kind of take something from inside Trimble Connect and use this to our advantage. So we'll create a couple of these to create an object IMP. So I'll move that off to the side really quick. I'm going to reopen this part attributes. I'm going to skip the tutorial this time. So we'll just do, I don't know, 2 or 3 of these attributes just to get an idea here. So let's go ahead and do the name. One thing that I typically do is I give this kind of like a prefix, each one of these, so that they can be associated together. I'm going to go a little on the nose since this represents a generic type of pour card. We're just going to do card. I'm going to keep everything in caps, and I'm going to go card plan review. And then we'll just say plan review. Oops. Now I want this to be a string. So I want to be able to populate that data from Trimble Connect, write it in through the attribute importer, or populate it directly by typing inside of Tekla Structures and then report on it. So then I'm going to go ahead and add that. And then we'll step down to the next one. I'm going to keep that prefix and we'll say, okay, how about for the form work, have the form locations, or is the form on the correct location? So we'll do for form location. And then we'll provide that display name. So form location. There we are. And we'll hit add. It's pretty straightforward. It's actually quite repetitive. let's go ahead and add, well, maybe just one more, but we'll change it up. We'll go reinforcement or rebar. We'll do rebar. It's easier to type. Rebar placement. And then there we are, and add. So as we do that, now we need to give our tab a name. So let's call this just simply pour card. This could be my company's attributes. It could be pre-construction checklist. It could be anything that you want. This tab number here, I'm going to stick with 100 for now. And what types of parts to add this to. Now, here's the interesting thing. These are all parts, right? Beams, columns, concrete, strip footings, and panels, and all that sort of stuff. That's all lovely, but that actually doesn't apply to pours. You notice this tool kind of predates the pour technology. So you can normally just check whatever applies and then leave it alone. One thing I'll do is I'll show you a little trick on how to get it to apply to a pour unit. So for my own purposes, I'm just going to leave one of these checked. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit add the pour card there. And then I'm going to hit create. Yeah. And ask me, we'll go back to the desktop. And I'll just give this a postfix there of pour card. There we go. Okie dokie. So let's go ahead and take a look at our results. Here we are. Pretty straightforward and simple, right? We have our parts, and but we're going to have to change some things here. And the reason I chose to do this to pours is to show you, well, hey, you know, it's straightforward to do it to any kind of part, right? But if you do want to do it to a pour object or a pour unit, then it's going to be a slightly different process, where we're going to have to make some manual edits, and I did want to highlight that. So let's do that right now. So up at the top, instead of part, we're going to need to change this to the correct syntax for a pour unit. It's pretty simple, pour unit. Now, I'll point out that if you do go into the system folders and look for objects, or just search for object IMP, there is a pour unit 1 already available, so you can use that as a visual example. Remember, do not edit that file. If you need to, make a copy and save it elsewhere to view. The other thing too here is I don't really like this page name of TOAS 100, and it's populated in a couple of spots, so we can always do a find and replace. Oops, let's go R for replace. Edit. There we are. So let's go ahead and change this from TOAS underscore 100 to pour card with an underscore in between. There we are. And then replace all. Okay, so now I have a more applicable tab name, and that I've changed all of those there to kind of associate. Now here are my attributes. It also gives this tool, which you can leave, is some prefixes ahead of what I placed, ATT100. Personally, I don't want that. You don't have to delete them, and you don't have to even come into the file once it's been created. You can just put it into your firm folder. But if you like to do a little house cleaning, this is how you'd go about it. Once we're done, we're just going to hit save. Now, with that, all we need to do is place this in a project or a firm folder and save our model and reopen, and those attributes will be available for us in Tekla Structures. Now, just to tie everything home, I have a firm folder that I've been using to build some of my Basecamp stuff, and I have this completed pour card objects IMP, and I have a model now that's opened up inside of Tekla Structures. And if we're just double checking, I want to show you here that we are pointing when it comes to the firm, that Basecamp firm is right here. So I'm already pointing there just to kind of show you the correlation. It's applied to pour unit, so we have to turn pour on and then turn on selecting assemblies, and then select the pour unit and then go to user defined attributes, and then we can have pour card, and there it is. So now we, if we wanted to, could localize these, customizing the properties pane to show these on the properties pane for pour units. This concludes our video. Thank you for watching. For more information on the topics discussed in this video or other topics, please visit our Tekla User Assistance webpage for product guides, support articles, tutorials, and more.